Hello, 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 children. Hello, lovelies. You're welcome to another interesting basic science class. I trust you're ready for this class. So get your writing materials ready because we'll be learning something very interesting today. You're welcome. We're looking at a wonderful topic, which is the platypus. So we'll be knowing what a platypus is, we'll be knowing what it looks like, how it moves, and many others. Platypus is a strange animal found only in Australia. So where is it found? Australia. Very good. It has four like other mammals, meaning it has a on its body. The hair on the body of animals is known as fur. It is warm-blooded. Now, a baby platypus drinks its mother's milk like other mama babies. Now, there's something that makes a platypus different from all other mammals, which is the female platypus lays eggs. Now, what does a platypus look like? So, how can you identify a platypus? Platypus is about 24 inches long. Now it has a thick brown, you can see it on your screen. It has a thick brown fur. That's the hair on his body, which is waterproof, meaning water cannot affect the fur. Now it has fur everywhere on its body, apart from the feet. You can see the feet is not covered with fur. On his bill, which is his mouth, the bill is not covered with fur. And again, they have short legs, very very short legs. You can see the legs on your screen, and these legs, they are webbed just the way a dog feet is. That is, they are easily connected, as if there's something connecting them. They are not separated like the way your fingers are separated. There is a connection, which is it is webbed. Then it is wide. A platypus is wide, and it has a flat tail. You see it, you can see it on the screen. Another thing again is they have sharp nails on their feet. And what do they use these nails for? They use it to dig burrows, they use it to dig holes. Now, there's a strange thing about there's one strange thing about a platypus body, which is its bill. What did I say? Its bill is its mouth. Now what happens is that this platypus, the bill looks like that of a duck. You see it now? It has the bill like that of a duck, and it is a snout as though it's rubber, like it's covered in a rubber skin. Remember, we said that some parts of the platypus that are not covered with fur, and we named some parts like the bill, we named the feet. Now, a male platypus has paw on its ankle. You can see a finger holding a feet on the screen, yes, and it's showing us the spore on the male platypus ankle. The spore holds poison that can kill small animals. It's very poisonous, and it is found on which part of the body of the platypus? The ankle, and it is found on a male platypus ankle. So how does a platypus move? A platypus spends most of its time in freshwater ponds and in streams. So it is adapted, it can live in the water. So when it's in the water, it closes its eyes, it closes its nostrils. You know the nostrils, the hole where air can pass through in your nose. So it closes its eyes, it closes its nostrils and ears when it swims under water. So a platypus is a great swimmer, like a very great swimmer. It knows how to swim very well. So it uses its front feet to move through the water, then it stares like to clear the way with the back feet and the flat tail. So how does a platypus gather food? A platypus does most of its hunting at night. It feeds on tiny animals like crayfish, snails, shrimps, worms. Then it uses its sensitive rubbery snout, that bill, to scoop tiny prey from the muddy water, to carry little animals that it wants to feed on from the muddy water, you know, in the pond or the stream where he can live. Then the platypus stores the food in his cheek pouches. Then he returns to the surface where he can eat this food. A platypus does not have teeth, but he can grind the food on rough ridges inside his cheek. There are some rough ridges inside the cheek of a platypus which he uses to grind the teeth. Another thing about a platypus is a platypus stores fat in its tail. So in a platypus tail, fat is stored there. And what does it use this fat for? The fat is used for energy when it cannot find food. So even though a platypus does not eat, a platypus can still survive. It can still have energy. Do you know why? Because it can store food in its tail. Now you can see a platypus, you can see the cheek pouches is swollen because food is being stored there. So how are platypus babies born? First of all, a female platypus builds a nest in a tunnel. You know what a tunnel is? Like a hole. Then she digs the tunnel in the river bank. She always builds a tunnel at the river bank, the side of the river. Then she lines the nest with grass and leaves. She's trying to prepare now. She wants to give birth to her baby. She has built a nest in a tunnel. She digs the tunnel in the river bank. Then she lines the nest with grass and leaves, like the one you can see on your screen. Then she lays 2 or 3 small eggs in the nest. After that, one thing about these eggs is that they have leathery shells. They are like leather. Then she holds these eggs between her tails and belly for about 2 weeks. Then this process of holding this egg is she's keep trying to keep the egg warm. She's giving warmth to the egg. Then after they hatch, the tiny babies crawl up on the mother's belly. They drink milk that comes from tiny openings in her belly. The next topic we'll be looking at is why recycle. So we'll be knowing the reasons why we recycle and some things that can be recycled, the importance of recycling too. So as we walk and we play, we are left with piles of trash. So even when you eat, you walk, you play, even in your class, we are left up with piles of trash. Now, not everything needs to end up in the garbage can. Not everything needs to end up in the waste bin. Not every of these dirt needs to end up in the dustbin. So many of them can be recycled. So now the question is, what is recycling? Recycling is making something new from materials we have already used. What did I say recycling is? Recycling is making something new from materials we have already used. So meaning we've used these materials before, but instead of throwing them away, instead of dumping them, we get these materials, we make them into something new so that we can reuse them. So that is what recycling is. So used glass can be made into new bottles, empty cans can be made into new cans, used paper can be made into new paper, plastic trash can be made into new useful forms. But why should we recycle? Is it important? Is it really useful to us? Is recycling useful to us? Now, one reason why we should recycle is recycling reduces the amount of trash we throw away. So if we know we have to recycle, there will be no too much dirt for us in our waste bins. There will be no dirt for us in our environment because we know we are able to use this dirt back. So there will be little to put in the incinerators. There will be little to put in our trash cans. Instead of trashing them or throwing them away, we are able to recycle them into something new. Another thing about recycling is that recycling saves resources. So by using the same materials over again. So instead of losing, maybe you have an old book or old carton or old paper in your house, instead of wasting that resources, you are able to use it again. So by so doing, you have saved resources. So, and again, this in return saves energy. So the energy you'd have used to make a new book from the scratch, it's being reduced. Because why? Instead of making a fresh one, you just get the old one and recycle it. So the old processes, the energy, the labor, they are reduced. And another one is recycling creates less pollution. You don't see dirt littered around the environment. There are less air pollution. The water is clean because of recycling. So how can we recycle? How can we recycle? We've known that recycling is important. We've known what recycling is. So how can we recycle? So communities have different rules for recycling. Different communities and environments have different ways for recycling. Now, some communities would prefer all the waste from the environment are gathered in one container, so they just have a community refuse dump where everyone in the community or in the environment dumps their dirt. While others, they prefer that every item should be separated, meaning you separate newspapers from magazines. You have different kinds of paper separated, and these paper, they are tied into bundles. You can tie cartons into bundles, you tie books into bundles. Some also prefer you separate cans, you glass and plastic into different containers. There are some ways to prepare trash for the recycling bin. What do? You wash the glass and remove any metal lid. Do not put mirrors or broken glass in the recycling bin. Then you have to separate the newspaper from other kinds of paper. Then you rinse the cans before putting them into the recycling bin. Then rinse plastic bottles and remove the lids or the caps, the cover. Then flatten the bottles so they don't take up so much room in the recycling bin. So today we'll be talking about fossils. We'll be learning a lot about fossils, and we'll also be knowing the scientists that discover or study fossil. So now let's start with what are fossils. Fossils are hardened remains of animals or plants that lived millions of years ago. So what did I say fossils are? I said they are hardened remains of animals or plants that lived millions of years ago. So the remains or the leftover of animals of plants that have lived years ago are known as what? Fossils. Scientists study these fossils to find out about ancient life. So if you want to know about ancient life, the things that have existed on Earth before, then you have to carry out a research on these fossils, and it is scientists that study about these fossils. So we can see fossils both on land and in the sea. You can see fossils both on land and in the sea. Now, in 1990, there was a fossil hunter, a scientist that made a big discovery about fossil in the Dakota Desert, and the name of the scientist is Sue Hendrickson. And the fossil she found that has been the largest and the most complete skeleton so far. After an animal or plant dies, its soft parts decay. You see, the body parts of these animals or plant begin to decay. They begin to decompose. They begin to break into smaller pieces. But the hard parts, which is definitely the skeleton, remains lying on the ground. So some of these hard parts were covered with sand or dirt or mud. So over millions of years, minerals enter this skeleton, because you know what, they spent millions. So because of the decomposition, the breaking down of the body parts into tiny pieces, the hard parts, minerals begin to enter into it, and before you know, what is left are just some remains which are known as fossils. The largest fossils are of the dinosaurs. Dinosaurs once existed, they've gone extinct, they are no longer in existence. Why did we know that dinosaurs once existed? It's because of their fossils. Their fossils were found, the remains of their body parts were found. So the largest fossils so far are those of a dinosaur. Now, there are fossils of whole skeletons. You can see a fossil of a whole skeleton, every part of the body complete, every bones complete. Now there are fossils of nests of dinosaur eggs. You can see it on the screen, dinosaur eggs. So there are fossils of their teeth. You have fossils of footprints. You have prints of skin. All of these have been found. So after finding out all these, researches are made and carried out on this part to trace the animal that has the parts. So you can see different fossils. You can find fossils on land and in the sea. You can see fossil of a giraffe. You can see fossil of dinosaur. You can see a fossil of a sea animal here. So fossils, sometimes these fossils, they are kept in a particular place where people can visit and watch these things, and they go for sightseeing and they appreciate what the scientists have done. Scientists that discover and study about fossils are called what? Paleontologists. So what do? These paleontologists, they spend all of their time studying fossils, just the way you are in school studying different subjects and all, but their own focus in just on fossils. Remember I told you fossils are the hardened remains of animals or plants that have lived millions of years ago. So they begin to study these fossils, then they go on field trips, because some of these fossils, they are collected in faraway distance. So they go on field trips, they go to places where they can likely see a fossil, and they begin to collect. You can see in the picture if scientists discovering, sometimes they have to dig, to get these bones out of the soil. So you can see a scientist digging out a fossil that he just found out. Then you can see another picture where the scientist is studying about the fossil he has found out. So they study the rocks where fossils can be found. I told you there are different places fossils can be found. They study rocks. Then each new fossil discovery adds to our understanding of what Earth was like in prehistorical times. So thanks to paleontologists, so thanks to this paleontologist, so with each discovery they make, with each study they carry out, it begins to add up to our knowledge, to know what Earth really looks like, to know what Earth and the kind of animals that existed in ancient times. Beautiful children, the next topic we'll be looking at is a North American desert. A North American desert. Can you repeat after me? A North American desert. Have you seen a desert before? Have you been to a desert? Do you even know what a desert looks like? So this is the more reason you have to pay attention to what I have to say, because I'll be telling you what a desert is, and I'll be describing some deserts for you, and also telling you some living things that live in the desert. When you look at a desert, it looks like a place with few living things. You must have seen desert in your books or in your cartoons or your films. So when you look at this desert, they look like a place with few living things. Do you know why? Because they don't really look like your environment. In your environment, the place around you, whether your school environment or your home environment, you see a lot of trees, you see different insects, you see different animals, you see many houses. But the desert may not look like that. But when you take a closer look at the desert, guess what? There are hundreds of kinds of plants and animals living there. Wow, I know you are shocked, like, really? I thought a desert is a dry place. I thought a desert is a dry land. Yeah, that's why you need to stay with me and learn more. So what is a desert? A desert is any place that gets less than 10 inches of rain each year. What this just means is a desert gets less amount of rainfall every year, meaning it does not rain much in a desert. So there are some deserts that are covered in sand, and so when the wind blows the sand, they are blown into mounds or hills called dunes. While there are some deserts that are covered with rocks or hills, so when the wind blows them, they are carved into strange shapes. There are some other deserts that are very hot, and there are some deserts that are cold. The desert in North America are very hot deserts, and we are talking about a North American desert. Now, they get very little amount of rainfall. The little rain that falls quickly evaporates, so it's difficult to get water in the desert. There's also an example of a cold desert which is known as Siberia. So Siberia is an example of a cold valley. Now quickly, do you know that plants live in the desert? Yes, we have hundreds of plants living in the desert. So, plants growing in the desert must be able to live for a long time without rainfall. And a place where there is no rainfall is known as drought. What did I say? Drought. So these plants, for them to be able to live in the desert, they must possess some characteristics. They must have some abilities which some other plants do not have, because it's not all plants that can live in the desert. So number one is they must be able to live for a very long time without rainfall. They must also learn to adapt to it. They must be able to survive under hot conditions because the desert is very hot. Now, guess how these plants are able to survive without water. Now, some of these plants, they store water when rain falls. So when rain falls, they're able to store water. An example of a plant which lives in the desert is cactus. Now, this cactus, they have thick stems, and so with that thick stem, they are able to store water. While some others, they store their water in their leaves. So when it rains, they are able to store their water in their leaves. So these leaves, they are covered with layers of wax or little air. So it's this little air that are able to trap the rain when it falls on them. Some others have some kind of abilities that make it difficult for water to evaporate, because once the water evaporates, it means that the water goes back into the air. So desert plants can live for many months using this stored water. The different places I've told you they store their water, some on their leaves. Yeah. Where can they also store their water? Like the cactus. Very good, on their thick stem. Also, some desert plants have deep roots. You know what a root is? A root holds a plant firmly to the soil. So a root is what holds a plant firmly to the soil, to the ground. So some of them have very deep roots that goes deep into the soil. So the roots are able to pull water from below the earth's surface. You see it now? While some others have surface roots, meaning their roots are just on the surface and they spread across. That means their roots are very large, and so because of this, they're able to collect water on the ground when rain falls. Examples of desert plants are barre cactus, we also have ocotillo, and we have cholla cactus. So these are examples of plants that live in the desert. And apart from plants living in the desert, we also have animals living in the desert. They are desert animals. Now, it is not easy for animals to live in a desert because these animals must be able to live with very little water. Remember, on our water day, we were told some uses of water. People, including plants and animals, cannot survive without water. You can go for days without food, but try to go for days without water. Some persons cannot survive it. So it is not easy for animals to stay in the desert. Now, for these animals to stay in the desert, they must have some special abilities, some features, some characteristics, just as the plants. So and one of which is they must be able to live for a very long time without water or with little water. Now, some of these animals get their water from plants or seeds they eat. Now, how do they do this? Remember, these plants, they've already stored water. These seeds, they've stored water. So the animals that are feeding on these plants or these seeds are able to take the water from the plants when they feed on them. Some other animals which feed on meat, which are predators, they get water from the prey they eat. So you see the way they survive. So not all animals have these abilities. So the ones that have the abilities are the ones that can stay in the desert. So some other animals get water by licking the dew that are collected on plants and on rocks during the night. When you wake up early when you wake up in the morning, you find out that there are some tiny droplets around. It can be on plants, even on rocks, on stones. Now, these are dews. So some animals lick this dew so that they can have water. Another thing is Heat is a problem in the desert because the desert is a very hot place. Remember, we said it can be hot and that it can be cold, but North American deserts are usually hot. So the animal must be able to live in a hot place. So some of these animals, they are able to rest in shady spots during the day, while others live under the ground. So they only come out at night. While some animals have hard scales on their body that keep them from drying out in the hot sun. Thank you for watching. Hope you enjoyed the video. Do not forget to attempt your quiz and do your assignment. Bye for now and see you in our next class.